actually.
Oh, sorry, didn't see you there. I'm Mr. Smith. I'm just reading from my favourite book, Where the Wild Things Are, by Maurice Sendak. You can join us if you want. It tells the story of Max, a little boy in his favourite wolf suit, who goes into his bedroom and in his imagination sails off to a place where the wild things are. He sailed in and out of weeks and almost over a year to where the wild things are. And when he came to the place where the wild things are, they roared their terrible roars.
Roar! Roar!
And gnashed their terrible teeth. And rolled their terrible eyes. And showed their terrible claws. Till Max said, "Be still." And tamed them with a magic trick of staring into all their yellow eyes without blinking once. And they were frightened and called him the most wild thing of all. Thank you.
Who are you?
Hello, I'm William D, and I'd like to talk about a book that I'm reading currently called Swallows and Amazons by Arthur Anson. Here's a passage from it. John hurried through the trees until he came to a harbour. There he found a place from which he could look out without being seen. He unstepped the mast of the swallow in case it could be seen over the rocks, and then hid himself and waited. I like this book because it is an adventure story and it is fiction. It is about four children who go camping on an island for a few days, and while they are there, they have some enemies who are in charge of the boat, the Amazon, and they have a lot of battles, and then they form an alliance.
My name is Talia. I got this book from the World Book Festival yesterday and I was going to read a little paragraph. I've done my research. I know that Australia is beautiful, sunshiny, unspoiled. It's the perfect place for a new beginning. It's also the perfect where Britain once stripped its convicts long ago.
Okay, so my favourite book is Haroun and the Sea of Stories by Salman Rushdie, and I'll just read a small little excerpt from it. Prince Bolo sent one of his pages to escort Haroun and If to the royal quarters in the heart of the palace. This page, who didn't look much older than Haroun, introduced himself as Blabbermouth, which, as it turned out, was a popular name in Gup for girls as well as boys. Blabbermouth was wearing one of the page's regular rectangular tunics, on which Haroun observed the text of a story called Bolo and the Golden Fleece. "That's strange," he said to himself. "I thought the story was about someone else."
Hello, my name is Mara Stropney. This is my favourite book, Warhorse by Michael Morpurgo. The genre is action and drama, and it's a real thrill seeker. Perhaps it was the contrast with the few idyllic months we had spent with Emily and her father that made what followed so harsh and such bitter an experience for Top Fawn and me. Or perhaps it was just that the war was all the time becoming more terrible. In places, now the guns were lined up only a few yards apart for miles and miles, and when they sounded out their fury, the very earth shook beneath us. The lines of wounded seemed interminable now, and the countryside was laid waste for miles behind the trenches. This is my favourite book because although it is sad towards the end, there is lots of action in it and it's about war, and I quite like war books. It has lots of different characters with different emotions, and it makes you feel what it's like to be on the front line.
Hi, my name is Lachlan Wilkinson Wright, and this is my favourite book, Gangster Granny. I like it a lot because it's funny and the genre is humour, and no matter how many times I read it, it makes me laugh every time. Well, if you like Scrabble, you must pop over to the old folks' home one day for a game, said Edna. I need a new partner now your granny's gone. That would be great, said Ben. Later that evening, as his parents watched the Strictly Styles Dancing Christmas special, Ben climbed out of his bedroom window and slid down the drain pipe without a sound. He took his bike out of the garage and cycled to Granny's house one last time.
My favourite book is Treasure Island. This is written by Robert Louis Stevenson. It's set about 300 years ago, but it was written a good 150 years ago. See if you like it. I remember him because it was yesterday, as he came plodding to the inn door, his sea chest following behind him in a hand barrow. A tall, strong, heavy, nut-brown man, his tarry pigtail falling over the shoulders of his soiled blue coat, his hands ragged and scarred, with black broken nails, and the sabre cut across one cheek, a dirty, livid white. I remember him looking around the cove and whistling to himself as he did so, and then breaking out in that old sea song that he sang so often afterwards. 15 men on a dead man's chest, yo-ho-ho and a bottle of rum. In the high, tottering old voice that seemed to have been tuned and broken at the capstan bars. Then he rapped on the door with a bit of stick like a handspike that he carried. When my father appeared, called roughly for a glass of rum. This is when it was brought to him. He drank slowly like a connoisseur, lingering on the taste and looking about him at the cliffs and up at our signboard. This is Andy Cove, says he at length, and a pleasantly situated grog shop. Much company, mate? My father told him no, very little company. The more was the pity. Well then, he said, this is a berth for me. Here you, matey, he cried to the man who trundled the barrow. Bring up alongside and up on my chest. I'll stay here a bit, he continued. I'm a plain man. Rum and bacon and eggs is what I want. And that head up there for to watch ships off. What might you call me? You might call me captain. Oh, and I see that you're up there. He threw down 3 or 4 gold pieces on the threshold. You can tell me when I've worked through that, he said, looking as fierce as a commander. I love this book because it's about pirates, but more that it lets me think in that great, great pirate voice. It's just genius. Oh, and it's got treasure in it. Treasure Island, that's the clue. Thank you.
Thank you.
I like this Diary of a Wimpy Kid by Jeff Kinney. I tried to explain all of this popularity stuff to my friend Rolly, who was probably hovering right around the 50 mark by the way, but I think it just goes one ear and out of the other with him. I like this book because it's really interesting and it makes me laugh.
I'm B and I like I Tell You I Love You But Then I Have to Kill You by Ali Carter. I suppose a lot of teenage girls feel invisible sometimes, like they just disappear. Well, that's me, Cammy the Chameleon. But I'm luckier than most because at my school that's considered cool. I go to a school for spies. I like this book because it's got a lot of action in it and it's exciting.
I've chosen to read an extract for you from the Bible. It isn't my favourite book. I've read lots of ones that I probably enjoyed more, but it's been really important, so that's why I've chosen it. Okay. Everything that happens in this world happens at the time God chooses. He sets the time for birth and the time for death, the time for planting and the time for pulling up, the time for killing and the time for healing, the time for tearing down and the time for building. He sets the time for sorrow and the time for joy, the time for mourning and the time for dancing, the time for making love and the time for not making love, the time for kissing and the time for not kissing. He sets the time for finding and the time for losing, the time for saving and the time for throwing away, the time for tearing and the time for mending, the time for silence and the time for talk. He sets the time for love and the time for hate, the time for war and the time for peace.
Hi, I'm Alex and I'm reading Wolf Island by Darren Chan. We turn a corner. I see hordes and demons running wild, humans feeling the monstrous creatures. With an excited yelp, I lead my misshapen troops into action. As I zone into the demonic army, I smile and think there's at least one guarantee I can make. If Junie's right, and it's my fate to destroy this planet, the poet got it wrong. The world won't end with a bang or a whisper. It will end with the death screams of thousands of demons and definite, carefree, savage wolf and howls. I like this book because it's full of action and there's lots of parts with tension in.
I'm Mother Robson and this is Animal Farm by George Orwell. The But they had not gone 20 yards when they stopped short. An uproar of voices was coming from the farmhouse. They rushed back and looked through the window yet again. Yes, a violent quarrel was in progress. There were shoutings, bangings on the table, sharp suspicious glances, furious denials. The source of the trouble appeared to be that Napoleon and Mr. Pilkinson had each played an ace of spades simultaneously. 12 voices were shouting in anger. They were all alike. No question now what had happened to the faces of the pigs. The creatures outside looked from pig to man, and from man to pig, and from pig to man again, but already it was impossible to say which was which. So I really like it because it portrays how innocent revolution can turn into brutal dictatorship.
Hello, I'm Stephanie Sari. I'm from 7SUN, Year 7 in Lytham High School. My favourite book is Harry Potter and the Order of Phoenix. Harry was first to wake up in his dormitory next morning. He lay for a moment watching dust swirl in the ray of sunlight coming through the gap in his four posters' hangings, and savoured the thought that it was Saturday. The first week of term seemed to have dragged on forever, like one gigantic history of magic lesson. Judging by the sleepy silence and the freshly minted Benedictine sunlight, it was just after daybreak. He pulled open the curtains around his bed and got up and started to dress. The only sound apart from distant twittering of birds was the slow, deep breathing of his fellow ribbon doors. He opened his bag carefully, pulled out parchment from the table, and headed out the dormitory for the common room.
The current book that I'm reading is called The Girl on the Train by Paula Hawkins. Wednesday the 10th of July 2013, morning. The heat is building. It's barely 8:30 and already the day is close. The air is heavy with moisture. I could wish for a storm, but the sky is an insolent blank, pale, watery blue. I wipe away the sweat on my top lip. I wish I'd remembered to buy a bottle of water. I can't see Jason and Jess this morning, and my sense of disappointment is acute. Silly, I know. I scrutinise the house, but there's nothing to see. The curtains are open downstairs, but the French doors are closed, sunlight reflecting off the glass. The sash window upstairs is closed too. Jason may be away working. He's a doctor, I think, probably for one of those overseas organisations. He's constantly on call. A bag packed on top of the wardrobe. There's an earthquake in Iran or a tsunami in Asia, and he drops everything. He grabs his bag and he's at Heathrow within a matter of hours, ready to fly out and save lives.
Hi, I'm Maddie, and the book I've chosen because it's a good book is The Lovely Bones by Alice Sebold. Inside the snow globe on my father's desk, there was a penguin wearing a red and white striped scarf. When I was little, my father would pull me into his lap and reach for the snow globe. He would turn it over, letting all the snow collect on top, then quickly invert it. The two of us watched the snow fall gently around the penguin. The penguin was alone in there, I thought, and I was worried for him. When I told my father this, he said, "Don't worry, Susie, he has a nice life. He's trapped in a perfect world." I like this book because it's relevant to sort of society now, that these things do sort of happen to people, so it's not just a story, it's kind of relating to real life, and it's quite an intriguing book.
Hi, my name's Ella Peebles. This book's called Cleo, and it's about a woman who's just lost her son, and they've got a cat and it's helping heal the family, so I'm going to read this paragraph. The kitten would need to do an awful lot of eating and growing to fill those empty pouches. Even then, it stood no chance of looking presentable. A larger, filled-out version of the kitten had freak potential. I took a step backwards. It was definitely one of those things that look better from a distance. At least the colour was consistent. The kitten couldn't have been blacker. From the claws and pads of its feet to its whiskers, it was black. Even the pins of its claws were black. Its eyes were the only things that broke the rule. They were shimmering green mirrors that hardly belonged to a cat. Surely they'd been stolen from a creature from another world. As Rob stroked her forehead with his finger, the kitten gazed adoringly up at him. My heart lurched. All of a sudden, the kitten wasn't ugly anymore. Sun caught her fur.
Affection beamed from her eyes. She radiated a kind of silvery light. The room filled with beauty, the pure essence of all new beings. They looked so perfect together, like a scene from a 1950s advertisement.
Good morning, I'm Mr. Uphill and this is one of my favourite books, Harry Potter, fantastic series of books. Percy and Padfoot. Harry was first to wake up in his dormitory next morning. He lay for a moment watching dust whirl in the ray of sunlight coming through the gap in his four-poster hangings and savoured the thought that it was Saturday. The first week of term seemed to have dragged on forever, like one gigantic history of magic lesson. Judging by the sleepy silence and the freshly minted look of that beam of sunlight, it was just after daybreak. He pulled open the curtains around his bed, got up and started to dress. The only sound apart from the distant twittering of birds was the slow, deep breathing of his fellow Gryffindors. He opened his school bag, carefully pulled out parchment and quill, and headed out of the dormitories for some common room. Making straight for his favourite squashy old armchair beside the now extinct fire, Harry settled himself down comfortably and unrolled his parchment while looking around the room. The detritus of crumpled up bits of parchment, old gobstones, empty ingredient jars and sweet wrappers that usually covered the common room at the end of each day was gone, as were all Hermione's elf hats. Wondering vaguely how many elves had now been set free, whether they wanted to be or not, Harry uncorked his ink bottle, dipped his quill into it, then held it suspended an inch from the smooth yellowish surface of his parchment, thinking hard. But after a minute or so he found himself staring into the empty grate at a complete loss of what to say.
Hi, I'm Grace. This is my book and it's one of the books from the Gallagher Girls, and it's about these girls that go to the Gallagher Academy, and it's undercover spy school and they have to get through lots of tests and things, so I'm going to read you a bit of chapter 7. There are many things to love about the welcome back dinner. 1. Hearing what everyone did over the summer vacation, which is probably far more interesting at school when there's a very good possibility that the stories include actual gunfire. 2. The fact that even though Grandma Morgan probably makes the best chicken and dumplings in the entire world, our chef used to work at the White House and sometimes a girl just needs a little creme brulee. 3. Gossip. Thanks.
Tom Gates and Roald Dahl. I really like this book because it's funny and it's about a boy called Tom Gates who's got mates at his school and he tries to form a rock band with his friends, and in school they go on a trip to a camping site, and I'll just read something out. It's nearly been a whole week since Mr. Fullerman gave me another form to fill in, which must still be in my room somewhere. As we drive home, Mum tells me not to worry, she says. There's nothing you can do about it now. Tom, I'll fit it in when we get back. That's the plan. Back at home, I go and search for my form straight away. I think it's buried in my messy room, but I hope it is. At last, it's under a pile of rock weeklies. I find it really funny, because it's just about, it reminds me of me a bit. I'm forgetting stuff and a bit clumsy. I take it downstairs and Mum fills it in, all in while Dad unpacks all the shopping. Mum makes a suggestion. So you don't miss the trip, why don't I pop into school with the form and have a quick word with someone? What sort of word do you want to have? Asked Mum, thinking the worst. Don't worry Tom, I'll ask Miss Fullerman or Miss Mumble about the trip very nicely. We don't want you to miss out. Then as usual, Delia, my sister, manages to turn up and join in the conversation.
I'm Amy and I got this book from the World Book Day Fair yesterday, and it's called Sweet Honey, and basically it's about this girl who's done like some bad things in her life, but she's going over to a new start to live with her dad in Australia. So I'm going to read a paragraph to you now. It's the first paragraph of chapter 8, I think. Okay. Dad was right about one thing. I am a tough cookie. My new life in Australia is going to be awesome. Things at Willowbank are a bit better. I am wearing my socks pulled up, my collar on the outside, my tent dress neatly hemmed up, and my yellow neckerchief tied jauntily around my neck. Every day I fix a winning smile on my face and set out to wow the staff and students, and it works a little bit. I begin to relax, fit in. For the first time in years, I am trying to make a good impression instead of a bad one. Thanks.